The ship came out of nowhere. One moment the sky above Earth's orbital station was empty. The next moment, a vessel the size of a small city hung in the darkness like a threat made real. Its hull was black and covered with strange symbols that glowed with soft purple light. The humans who saw it felt a cold fear settle in their stomachs. Ambassador? Vethkai stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around with eyes that had seen 1,000 worlds bow before him. He was tall and thin, with gray skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His species, the Velthari, had ruled the galactic sovereignty for 6,000 years. They had crushed rebellions, ended civilizations, and brought order to chaos across 100,000 star systems. Humans were nothing special to him. Just another young species that had stumbled into space, now needed to learn their place. The delegation from Earth waited in the main chamber. There were 12 of them, representing the unified government that humanity had formed after first contact with alien life 20 years ago. They wore formal clothes and tried to hide their nervousness. Admiral Helena Cross stood at the front. She was 63 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much war to be afraid of anything anymore. Vethkai walked to the center of the room. His guards, massive creatures in armor that looked like it was grown rather than built, took positions around the chamber. The ambassador smiled. It was a gesture his species had learned specifically because it made mammals uncomfortable. "I bring greetings from the galactic sovereignty," he said. His voice was smooth and cold. "For 40,000 years, we have maintained peace and order in this galaxy. Every spacefaring civilization has joined us. Every species has found its place in the great order of things. Now it is humanity's turn." He pulled out a scroll made of some material that seemed to shift and change color as he unrolled it. The demands were written in symbols that rearranged themselves into English as the humans watched. "These are the terms of your tribute," Vethkai announced. "First, you will provide 60% of your planet's atmospheric oxygen to be extracted over the next 10 cycles. Our processing ships will arrive within the month." The room was silent. Admiral Cross felt her hands tighten into fists. "Second, you will select 2 billion of your population for service integration. They will be transported to sovereignty labor networks where they will serve for the remainder of their natural lives." Someone in the human delegation made a sound like they had been punched. Vethkai ignored it. "Third, you will surrender all military vessels, personnel, and weapons development programs. The sovereignty does not permit subject species to maintain armed forces. And fourth," Vethkai continued, his smile growing wider, "you will surrender your moon. It will be hollowed out and converted into a monitoring station to ensure your continued compliance." He rolled up the scroll and looked at the humans with the patient expression of someone who had done this many times before. "These terms are generous. Most species lose far more. You should consider yourselves fortunate." The silence in the room was absolute. Admiral Cross looked at her fellow delegates. She saw fear in some faces, anger in others. But beneath all of that, she saw something else. Something that had burned in human hearts since the first cave dweller had picked up a rock to defend their family. She turned back to the ambassador and spoke a single word. "No." Vethkai's translator device made a strange clicking sound. He tilted his head like a confused animal. "I do not understand. Please repeat." "No," Admiral Cross said again. Her voice was calm and steady. "We reject your terms. All of them." The ambassador stared at her. In 40,000 years of sovereignty rule, no species had ever refused. The word was not even in his prepared responses. His smile faded slowly, replaced by something colder. "You do not seem to understand your situation," he said. "This is not a negotiation. This is a notification. You will comply, or you will be destroyed." Admiral Cross took a step forward. She was a full head shorter than the alien, but somehow she seemed larger in that moment. "No, Ambassador. You don't understand your situation. You came here expecting us to be afraid. You expected us to kneel, but you made a mistake. You didn't study our history." She gestured to the windows that showed Earth floating in the darkness below. "Do you see that planet? We have fought wars over every inch of it. We have killed each other by the millions over things as small as lines drawn on maps. We have survived ice ages, plagues, and weapons that could have ended all life on our world. And we are still here. Vethkai's guards shifted nervously. They had never seen a subject species speak to an ambassador this way. You want our air admiral? Cross continued. You want our people? You want our defenses. You want our moon? She shook her head slowly. You can't have them. Not now. Not ever. The ambassador's face twisted with anger. Do you have any idea what the sovereignty can do to your world? We have weapons that can crack planets like eggs. We have fleets that darken the skies of 100 systems. You have 72 hours, Admiral Cross interrupted. 72 hours to leave our solar system. After that, we will consider your presence an act of war. And I promise you, Ambassador, you do not want to see what humanity does when we go to war. Vethkai stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a harsh sound, like metal scraping against stone. You are insane. You are all insane. Very well, we will leave. But we will return with our fleets, and when we do, your world will burn. Your species will be erased from history. Not even your names will be remembered. He turned and walked toward the exit. At the door, he paused and looked back. Enjoy your last days, humans. They will be few. After he left, the chamber erupted in chaos. Some delegates were shouting about the need to surrender. Others were demanding to know if Earth could actually fight the sovereignty. Admiral Cross waited until the noise died down, then raised her hand for silence. They will be back, she said, and they will bring everything they have. But they made a mistake today. They showed us exactly what they want from us. Slavery, submission, the end of everything we are. She looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. I don't know about you, but I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. So we have work to do. We have a war to prepare for. And when they come back, we will show them exactly why humanity has survived everything the universe has thrown at us. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson that countless enemies throughout human history had learned before. Humanity might be young. Humanity might be small. But humanity did not surrender. And humanity never forgot. The sovereignty fleet arrived 17 days later. 400 warships dropped out of fold space at the edge of the solar system. Their arrival sending ripples through the fabric of reality that were detected by every sensor humanity possessed. Grand Admiral Kethfer stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched the distant yellow sun with cold satisfaction. This would be quick, he thought. This would be easy. His species had conquered 63 worlds. Humans would be number 64. But Grand Admiral Kethfer did not know what had been happening on Earth during those 17 days. He did not know about the United Earth Defense Initiative, a secret program that had been running for nearly a century. He did not know about the shipyards hidden in asteroid fields and beneath the surface of the moon. He did not know that humanity had been preparing for this exact moment since the day they first looked up at the stars and wondered if something dangerous was looking back. Captain Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, the first of humanity's Titan-class dreadnoughts. The ship was massive, bristling with weapons that had been designed by the most paranoid military minds humanity had ever produced. Around him, a fleet of 200 vessels waited in the darkness near Neptune. All ships, Chen said into the communication system, his voice reaching every human vessel in the system. They think we are afraid because we are young. They think we are weak because we have known peace. Today, we show them what humanity does when someone threatens our home. He paused and looked at the tactical display. The Sovereignty fleet was advancing in a standard formation, confident and unhurried. They had no idea what was waiting for them. All ships, Chen continued, weapons free. The Battle of the Kuiper Belt began at 6 in the morning. Earth's standard time. It would be talked about for centuries. The Sovereignty expected human ships to scatter and run. That was what every other species had done when faced with overwhelming force. Instead, the human fleet surged forward in attack formations that no sane species would attempt. They flew directly into the enemy lines. accepting terrible damage to deliver killing blows. Grand Admiral Kethfer watched in confusion as a human destroyer, its hull already torn open by enemy fire, continued on its collision course with one of his cruisers. The crew should have been dead. The ship should have been disabled. But it kept coming, engines burning bright, till it slammed into the cruiser's reactor core and destroyed both vessels in a ball of nuclear fire. "What are they doing?" Kethfer demanded. "This is suicide." His tactical officer had no answer. Nothing in sovereignty records matched what they were seeing. Human pilots were ejecting from damaged fighters and then manually steering them into enemy ships. Human crews were venting their own atmosphere to put out fires so they could keep fighting. Human captains were ramming their vessels into sovereignty carriers, just to take them out of the battle. The sovereignty had weapons that could crack planets. They had shields that could stop almost anything, but their shields were designed for energy weapons and normal projectiles. They were not designed for nuclear missiles traveling at 1/10 the speed of light. Launched in salvos of hundreds at once, Captain Chen watched as his missiles found their targets. Sovereignty shields flickered and failed under the overwhelming assault. Ships that had survived thousands of battles were torn apart by weapons that humanity had created to destroy itself, now turned outward against a common enemy. "This is impossible," Kethra whispered, as another section of his fleet vanished from the tactical display. "They are insects. How are they doing this?" The answer was simple, but the Grand Admiral would never understand it. Humans did not fight like other species because humans did not think like other species. When backed into a corner, when threatened with extinction, something ancient woke up in the human mind. Fear became fury. Desperation became determination. And a species that had spent its entire history fighting itself suddenly found a much better target for all that: violence. The battle raged for 11 hours. When it was over, the Sovereignty had lost 243 ships. The survivors fled into fold space, leaving behind fields of debris that would drift through the outer solar system for centuries. Grand Admiral Kethfer's final transmission was intercepted by human intelligence. His voice was shaking, all confidence gone. "They're insane. They fight like they have nothing to lose, yet everything to protect. We cannot defeat them with this fleet. We need reinforcements. We need all of them. Send everything we have." On Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. People danced in the streets. Children looked up at the sky and cheered. For the first time in weeks, humanity felt hope. But Admiral Helena Cross did not celebrate. She stood in the command center, watching the reports come in, and she knew that this was only the beginning. The Sovereignty had ruled the galaxy for 40,000 years. They would not accept defeat from a species they considered insects. She called a meeting of the Unified Council. The faces around the table were a mix of exhaustion and excitement, fear and pride. They had won an impossible victory. Now they needed to decide what to do next. "We hurt them," Cross said, pulling up the tactical data from the battle. "We hurt them badly. But this was just their first wave. The Sovereignty has thousands of ships, dozens of subject species they can call on for reinforcements. If we sit here and wait for them to come back, they will overwhelm us eventually." One of the diplomats spoke up. "What are you suggesting? That we attack them?" Cross nodded slowly. "That is exactly what I am suggesting. We take this fight to their territory. We hit them where they live. We make them understand that threatening Earth comes with a cost they cannot afford to pay." The room erupted in argument. Some thought the idea was madness. Others thought it was the only way to survive. In the end, Cross waited for silence and spoke again. "I know this is scary. I know we just won a battle we were not supposed to win, and the idea of pushing further seems like tempting fate. But we are not going to survive by being careful. We are going to survive by being so dangerous that no one ever wants to fight us again." She looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes just as she had done 17 days ago. "The Sovereignty thinks we are prey. Let us show them what happens when the prey becomes the predator." The vote was close, but in the end, humanity chose to attack. Ships that had just finished repairs were loaded with fresh weapons. Crews that had barely slept prepared for another battle. And across the solar system, the message went out to every human who could hear it. We are not waiting for them to come to us. We are bringing the war to them. The galaxy had never seen anything like it, and they would never forget what came next. 6 months after the Battle of the Kuiper Belt, humanity did something that no species had ever done in 40,000 years of galactic history. They attacked sovereignty space. The campaign was called the Burning Path, and it spread fear through every corner of the Empire. Human strike fleets would appear without warning in sovereignty systems, destroy military bases and shipyards, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. They hit supply lines and weapons factories. They destroyed communication stations and fuel depots. And then they disappeared, only to appear somewhere else and do it again. Commander Yuki Tanaka led the most famous of these raids. She was 34 years old, small and quiet, with a reputation for doing impossible things. Her unit, the Ghost Division, had become the nightmare of sovereignty commanders everywhere. Her target this time was Veth Prime, the homeworld of Ambassador Veth Kai's species. The same ambassador who had come to Earth demanding tribute. The same ambassador who had promised that humanity would be erased from history. The planet was heavily defended. Orbital stations circled it like a crown of steel and weapons. Thousands of ships patrolled the space around it. The largest shipyard in the sovereignty floated in orbit, producing the warships that would supposedly crush humanity forever. Commander Tanaka's team numbered only 40 soldiers. They approached in a captured sovereignty transport, using stolen codes to pass through the defense grid. By the time the alarm sounded, they were already on the surface. The mission was fast and brutal. Tanaka's team fought their way into the shipyard control center, planted enough explosives to turn the entire structure into dust, and then did something that changed everything. They hijacked the planet's communication network. Every screen on Veth Prime, every speaker, every device capable of receiving a signal, suddenly showed the same image. A human woman with hard eyes and blood on her armor, standing in the ruins of what had been the most secure facility in the system. "We did not ask for this war," Tanaka said into the camera. Her voice was calm and clear. "We do not want your worlds. We do not want your tribute. But if you continue to threaten our home, we will burn everything you hold sacred until you learn to leave us alone." This is not a threat. It is a promise. Humanity remembers, and humanity repays. The shipyard exploded behind her as she and her team escaped. The broadcast had been seen by billions of sovereignty citizens. For the first time in their history, they felt afraid. But the burning path did more than spread fear. It also revealed cracks within the sovereignty that had been hidden for thousands of years. Not all of the 12 elder species supported the war against humanity. The Mallory, beings of crystalline light, who had joined the sovereignty under threat of extinction long ago, had always opposed the tribute system. They were scholars and healers, and they believed that forcing other species into servitude was wrong. The war against humanity disgusted them. The Kethon were different. They were warriors, poets, who wrote their histories in blood and honor. They had respected the sovereignty's strength, but strength was not the same as bullying younger species into slavery. When they watched the recordings of human soldiers sacrificing themselves to protect their home, something stirred in there. Ancient hearts, respect, admiration, and a growing doubt about the empire they served. Human intelligence officers began reaching out to these species in secret. Messages were exchanged through hidden channels. Agreements were made in the shadows of encrypted communications. Admiral Cross saw an opportunity that went beyond military victory. If she could break the sovereignty from the inside, humanity would not just survive. They would reshape the entire galaxy. The War Council met to discuss the new intelligence. Some of the generals wanted to keep attacking, to press the advantage while the sovereignty was still reeling. Others worried about pushing too hard, about what the Empire might do to Earth if they became desperate. Admiral Cross listened to all of them. Then she proposed something that surprised everyone. "We offer peace," she said. The room went silent. After everything that had happened, after all the blood that had been spilled, The idea of peace seemed impossible. Not to the sovereignty, Cross continued. To the species within it who want something different, we send invitations to all 12 elder species. We offer them a choice. They can renounce the tribute system and join us as equals, or they can continue to serve the Empire and face the consequences. One of the generals shook his head. They will never accept. The sovereignty has held them together for 40,000 years. Why would they abandon it now? Cross smiled. It was the same smile she had shown Ambassador Vethkai on that first day. Because for 40,000 years they have been afraid. Afraid of the sovereignty's power. Afraid of what would happen if they spoke against it. But we have shown them that the sovereignty can be hurt. We have shown them that it can bleed. And once people realize that the thing they fear can be defeated, everything changes. The invitations were sent to all 12 elder species. The message was simple. A summit would be held on neutral ground. Any species that attended would be offered alliance and friendship. Any species that refused would be considered an enemy of humanity and all who stood with them. 8 species refused immediately. They were too afraid or too loyal to even consider the offer. The Mallory accepted within hours. Their response was a single word that translated roughly to finally. The Kethon requested time to consider. Their warrior councils debated for 3 days, arguments echoing through their great halls. In the end, they voted to send representatives to the summit. 3 species had taken the first step toward changing everything. And in the highest towers of the sovereignty's capital, Grand Sovereign Malachar watched the reports with growing fury. He was 6,000 years old, the oldest and most powerful of the Velthari. He had ruled the galaxy since before humanity had learned to farm, and now, impossibly, his empire was beginning to crack. Find their homeworld, he ordered his advisors. Find Earth, and prepare the silence engine. His advisors exchanged nervous glances. The silence engine had not been used in 10,000 years. It was a weapon so terrible that even the sovereignty had been afraid to activate it. A weapon that could kill stars. But Malachar was beyond caution now. If humanity would not kneel, then humanity would burn. And their son would be the first to die. The summit was held on Uranus V, a barren moon that orbited a dead planet at the edge of known space. 40,000 years ago, this same moon had witnessed the signing of the original Sovereignty Compact. Now it would witness something very different. High Mediator Solus of the Mellery arrived first. Her body was made of living crystal that shifted through colors as her emotions changed. Right now, she glowed with a soft blue light that meant hope. For 300 years, she had spoken against the tribute system. For 300 years, she had been ignored. Now, because of a species younger than her own career, everything might finally change. The Kethon came next. 7 warriors in ceremonial armor that had been worn in 1,000 battles. Their leader was Blade Sage Korath, an ancient warrior whose body was covered in scars and whose eyes held the weight of centuries. He had watched recordings of human soldiers dying to protect their comrades, and he had felt something he had not experienced in 200 years. Respect for an enemy. Admiration for their courage, and a growing shame at what his people had allowed the sovereignty to become. Admiral Helena Cross arrived last. She came alone, without guards, without weapons, walking into a chamber that could have been a trap. The Mallory delegation watched her with curiosity. The Kethon watched with something like approval. Korath spoke first. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. You came without protection. Either you are very brave or very foolish. Cross met his gaze without flinching. Peace requires someone to be brave first. I am willing to take that risk. Korath studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. My people have a saying. You can tell the worth of a warrior by what they are willing to sacrifice. You have sacrificed much already, human. Your people have sacrificed more. I begin to think we may have been wrong about your species. High Mediator Solus moved forward, her crystalline form chiming softly with each step. For 40,000 years, the sovereignty has demanded tribute from every species it encounters. We Mallory joined under threat of extinction. We have been waiting for someone brave enough to say no. You have given hope to billions who had none. The negotiations lasted 9 days. They argued about borders and trade. They discussed military cooperation and mutual defense. They talked about the kind of galaxy they wanted to build, one where no species would ever be forced to kneel again. What emerged from those 9 days was the coalition of free worlds. It was not an empire. It was not built on fear or tribute. It was an alliance of equals, bound together by shared values and mutual protection. Any world that joined would be defended by all. Any world that demanded tribute would face the united strength of the coalition. But as the leaders prepared to sign the final agreement, a message arrived that changed everything. It came from a defector within the sovereignty, a communications officer who had risked everything to send a warning. Grand Sovereign Malachar had activated the silence engine, a weapon so terrible that it had not been used in 10,000 years. A weapon that could reach across light years and destabilize the core of a star, causing it to collapse and die. The target was Earth's sun. Malachar's ultimatum was broadcast across the galaxy. His ancient face appeared on screens in every system, his voice dripping with contempt. Humanity has one cycle to surrender completely and unconditionally. Every human must submit to sovereignty control. Every human world must be handed over. Every human weapon must be destroyed. If these terms are not met, your sun will be silenced. Your world will freeze. Your species will die in darkness. The message ended, and the galaxy held its breath. Admiral Cross watched the recording with the other coalition leaders. The Mallory glowed with pale white light, the color of fear. Even the Kethon warriors looked troubled. "Can this weapon really do what he claims?" Cross asked. Korath nodded slowly. The silence engine was built in an age when the sovereignty was still growing, still conquering by force. It was used twice. Both times, entire systems were destroyed. We thought it had been decommissioned, but apparently Malachar kept it hidden, and we have to stop it, Cross said. "Where is it?" The defector's message included coordinates. The silence engine was housed in a station the size of a moon, orbiting the sovereignty's capital system. It was defended by the largest fleet in the galaxy, hundreds of ships and orbital platforms, all committed to protecting the weapon that could end humanity. "Attacking that system is suicide," one of the Mallory advisors said. "The defenses are too strong. We do not have enough ships." Cross looked around the room. She saw fear in many faces, doubt in others. But she also saw something else: determination, anger, the same fire that had burned in human hearts. When they had first refused the tribute demands, "We cannot surrender," she said. "If we surrender, every species in this galaxy will learn that standing up to the sovereignty means death. Every world that might have joined us will stay silent. Every hope of freedom will die." She stood up and faced the other leaders. "I am not going to let that happen. Humanity will fight, but we cannot do this alone." Blade Sage Korath rose to his feet. His ancient armor creaked with the movement, but his voice was strong. "The Kethon will fight beside you. We have served the sovereignty for too long. It is time we remembered what honor truly means." High Mediator Solus glowed bright gold, the color of resolve. "The Mallory are healers, not warriors. But we will send our ships. We will keep your wounded alive. We will do whatever we can to help." The coalition fleet was assembled in record time. Human dreadnoughts flew alongside Mallory healing vessels and Kethon war barges. Ships that had never fought together, trained for the most important battle in galactic history, Captain Marcus Chin, now commanding the newly built U.S. Retribution, addressed the combined crews. His words were translated into 100 languages and broadcast to every ship in the fleet. "We have been fighting for our survival. Now we fight for something bigger. We fight for the right of every world to exist without fear, without tribute, without chains. The sovereignty calls us insects. Let us show them what happens when the insects swarm." The fleet made the jump to fold space. Ahead of them waited the most powerful military force ever assembled in one place. Behind them, billions of people watched the skies and prayed. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, be decided in the hours to come. The coalition fleet dropped out of fold space into chaos. 800 sovereignty warships waited for them, arranged in defensive formations around the Silence Engine station. Orbital platforms bristled with weapons. Fighter squadrons swarmed like angry insects. It was the largest military force ever assembled in one place. It was all pointed directly at the coalition. Captain Marcus Chen looked at the tactical display and felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. They were outnumbered nearly 2-1. The sovereignty had better positions, better defenses, and a weapon that could destroy their sun if they failed. By any reasonable measure, this battle was already lost. But humans had never been reasonable. All ships, Chen said into the communication system. Today, we fight for everyone who ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of freedom. Today we fight for every world that has suffered under sovereignty rule. Today we show the galaxy what happens when free people stand together. The coalition fleet surged forward. The battle that followed would be remembered for 1,000 generations. Mallory healing ships moved through the chaos, projecting fields of energy that kept damaged vessels fighting long after they should have been destroyed. Kethon warbarges crashed directly into sovereignty lines, their warriors boarding enemy ships and fighting hand-to-hand through metal corridors. Human carriers launched swarms of fighter drones that overwhelmed targeting systems and created chaos wherever they went. But the sovereignty fought back with desperate fury. They knew what was at stake. If the coalition won here, if the Silence Engine was destroyed, the empire that had ruled for 40,000 years would fall. Ship after ship poured fire into the attackers, trying to stop them before they could reach the station. Commander Yuki Tanaka watched the battle from the bay of a stealth transport. Her Ghost Division was ready. 40 soldiers, in combat armor, the best humanity had to offer. Their mission was simple, but almost impossible. Get to the Silence Engine. Destroy it. Save Earth! The transport weaved through the battle, dodging fire, slipping past defensive lines. A sovereignty cruiser locked onto them, and for a moment, Tanaka thought they were dead. Then a Kethon warbarge slammed into the cruiser from the side, sacrificing itself to clear the path. "We will not forget that," Tanaka said quietly. Then the transport reached the station, and there was no more time for words. The Ghost Division breached the station's hull and fought their way inside. Sovereignty guards came at them in waves, and the soldiers cut them down without hesitation. They had trained for this. They had prepared for this. Every step brought them closer to the weapon that threatened their home. Tanaka reached the control chamber first. The door slid open, and she found herself facing Grand Sovereign Malachor. He was ancient beyond measure. His gray skin wrinkled and covered with symbols of power. He wore robes that seemed to be made of woven shadows. His eyes were cold and empty, the eyes of someone who had lived so long that life itself had lost all meaning. "You cannot win," he said. His voice echoed through the chamber. "Even if you destroy this weapon, the sovereignty will endure. We have survived worse than you. We will rebuild. We will return. And we will make your species suffer for 10,000 generations." Tanaka moved through the chamber, placing explosive charges on the engine's core, while her soldiers held the entrance. "You still do not understand us," she said quietly. "We are not fighting because we think we will win. We are fighting because it is right. Because no one gets to decide that another species must kneel." Malachor laughed. It was a terrible sound, like ice cracking. "Right, there is no right or wrong in the galaxy. There is only power. The strong rule. The weak serve. This is the way it has always been." Tanaka finished placing the last charge and looked directly at the ancient creature who had threatened her home. Maybe that was the way it was. "But we are going to change it. Starting now." She activated the detonator. The explosion tore through the Silence Engine, destroying systems that had taken centuries to build. The station began to collapse around them as Tanaka and her surviving soldiers ran for the extraction point. They barely made it to their transport before the entire structure came apart in a ball of fire and debris. Outside, the coalition fleet watched the station's destruction. The sovereignty ships, already struggling against the combined assault, began to waver. Some surrendered. Others tried to flee, and in a move that shocked everyone, Grand Admiral Kethfer, the same commander who had led the first attack on humanity, turned his weapons on Malakur's loyalists. A Grand Sovereign is dead. Kethfer broadcast on all channels. The silence engine is destroyed. This war is over. Any ship that wishes to continue fighting will answer to me. The battle ended not with a single decisive blow, but with a cascade of surrenders and defections. Ships that had served the sovereignty for thousands of years abandoned their posts. Commanders who had enforced the tribute system for generations laid down their weapons. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 40,000 years was falling apart before the Coalition's eyes. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy transformed. Species that had lived in fear for millennia suddenly found themselves free. Worlds that had paid tribute for generations kept their resources for themselves. The sovereignty fractured into a dozen pieces, some joining the Coalition, others retreating to their home systems to lick their wounds. 1 year later, the Treaty of Aranosfi was signed by 37 species. It was the largest voluntary alliance in galactic history. At its center, holding the pen, was Admiral Helena Cross. Humanity did not win this war alone, she told the assembled delegates. We won because we found others who believed what we believed. Freedom is not given. It is fought for. The galaxy told us to kneel. We chose to stand. And now, none of us will ever kneel again. In the archives of every civilization that witnessed these events, a new entry was added to the records on humanity. The species that had said no when no one else dared. The species that had fought an empire and won. The species that had changed everything, and in the quiet corners of the cosmos. Other young civilizations heard the story. Species still hiding, still afraid of what lurked in the darkness between stars. They heard about the humans who had refused tribute, who had brought fire to the doorstep of gods, who had proven that even the mightiest empire could fall. They began to hope. On Earth, monuments were built to those who had fallen. Names were carved in stone so they would never be forgotten. And above the memorial of the First Contact War, words were inscribed that would be read for 1,000 generations. They came demanding tribute. They received our wrath. And the galaxy was never the same. Humanity had looked up at the stars and seen threats beyond imagination. They had faced extinction and chosen to fight instead of surrender. And in doing so, they had not just saved themselves. They had shown every world in the galaxy that freedom was possible, that courage could overcome fear, that the universe belonged to those brave enough to claim it. The stars had never looked brighter.